If you were suddenly faced with a divorce or caregiving responsibility or bereavement, would your finances be in order? Could you continue to maintain your current lifestyle? If the answer's no, you're not alone. But there's plenty you can do to prepare.
Statistically, 1 in 2 couples will end up in a divorce, yet it comes as a surprise. But when it comes to money, crossing that bridge when you get to it can really be uncomfortable.
Usually too late.
Too late, right?
Hello, and welcome to the Wealth and Women podcast from the Personal Finance Society. I'm Emma Hall, and today we're asking, how can women prepare financially for life's unexpected events? Life's full of twists and turns that often come without warning and can have a major financial impact, particularly on women. Nearly 1 in 4 say they feel financially vulnerable after a divorce, and only about 11% surveyed felt both financially and practically prepared for the loss of a partner. But despite the bleak stats, there are steps that you can take today to feel ready and in control. To share their top tips, I'm joined by my lovely colleagues, Alina Burlicue, Hazel Bowen and Tracy Brooks. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, good to be back.
Yeah, another episode. So today we're going to be talking about life events. As human beings, we've been through personally, we've seen family, friends go through certain things, and obviously colleagues and clients that we work with. So today we want to talk about how we can make sure that women in particular are prepared, more prepared for those events. And they maybe don't come as such a surprise, especially on the financial impact side. So what sort of life events have you experienced with your clients, and how have you made them more prepared financially when these sorts of things occur?
One of the opportunities I think we have as financial planners is to start preparing early for life events. And I would say there's 2 areas that come to mind for me. The first is, as financial planners, obviously one of the things we try and do for our clients is reduce tax as much as possible, provided it's not getting in the way of life goals. And if you have a couple in a relationship where one is a higher rate taxpayer and one is a basic rate taxpayer, often the natural instinct is to, put as much in the higher rate taxpayer's pension as possible to reduce as much tax as possible, and perhaps not contribute so much into the basic rate taxpayer's pension as your advice. And that, in this example, I will say the higher rate taxpayer is a man and the basic rate taxpayer is a woman. There's nothing wrong with that advice, but I think it's very important when you're giving that advice to clients is to let them know that actually it does mean one of them is building up more financial security for their future, particularly if they're not married. If they were married, then potentially they'd have a claim on the husband's pension anyway. If they're unmarried, then they're potentially sleepwalking into a situation where they are both contributing to a household, but one is growing their wealth at a disproportionate rate. You can, balance that out by putting non-pension savings into the partner's name in that example, just to make sure that there is an equal split of assets. So I think that's one thing that we can do as planners is think truly holistically when we're giving advice. The other that I think leads on from that is when one of the first life changes that happens for many of our adult female clients is having a family and going on maternity leave. And some will stay off for a year or 2 years or go part-time. And one of the questions I ask couples in that situation is, what conversations have you had about how you're going to change the way you manage your finances as a couple so that you both have financial independence? And more often than not, that's the conversation that hasn't been had. And I think it's a great opportunity for us and kind of a responsibility for us to be able to open that conversation up, where that might be quite a difficult conversation to just start with your partner or your husband. And particularly if you're the woman and you're the one who's going to lose some income, to say, actually, can we start putting your salary into a joint account? And, can we share the disposable income equally so that I'm an equal recipient of your income because I'm contributing by looking after the child? So I think that they're 2 things I think where we can start setting our clients up for financial independence in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually, because, again, I think traditionally we're seen as financial planners and saving tax is always one of the leading things I think a lot of clients will talk about, particularly some of the men that I deal with. Like, that's the big thing. Oh, if we can save tax, that'll be great. But actually, you're right. If we consider how that might pan out in the future, if that couple happen to get divorced, that's quite unequal.
Yeah.
And you're right. Yes. Okay. There can be split of assets. But if you put people into more of maybe an equal position that's not just driven by tax every single time, or at least have that conversation, then there is a future perspective on how it might look.
Yeah. And they can go into it with their eyes open then at least if that's the decision that they want to make, if tax is the, driving factor. But I think our job is to educate, not tell people what to do. And if we can educate, people often come to sensible conclusions themselves.
As you were saying that, it's actually an angle that I've never actually considered. You're saying about the tax. Well, actually, the higher rate taxpayer is gaining more than the lower. And I think that really impacts, especially women going through, like a big life event is having children. It's not a sad event, but it's an event. But it's a huge change in a woman's life, and it does affect their confidence and their identity and who they are. I've had 3 kids. I know exactly from experience. So it's kind of preparing that woman on as well on that journey of, when do you think you're going to go back to work? What support have you got there? You've taken a career break. What impact is that having on your pension? It's just building that picture with that person who maybe has never been through that position before. If you've been in that position yourself as an advisor, it's quite a privilege that we can ask those questions that could sympathise with them a bit more.
It's funny actually you bring that up. So we do a lot of cash flow modelling as part of our job. And actually, when we talk about holistic planning, something that naturally always I talk about is protection for death or for terminal illness. And we do the what if scenarios on the cash flow modelling. But actually, I think to myself, have I ever gone, what happens if you get divorced? What happens if you have a baby and how the finances go that way? And actually modelled that on the cash flow modelling. It tends to be more of the protection side, because there's almost something that you can do in a physical aspect because of the policy that you might end up recommending as a solution.
But isn't that a difficult question to ask, to say, what if you get a divorce? You might have a happy couple in front of you. What happens if you get divorced? It's like, how do we approach that?
It's funny though, because statistically, 1 in 2 couples will end up in a divorce.
Quite high,
yet it comes as a surprise. And it's not factored in. Equally, you have a 50-50 chance that you're going to die at some point, right? So again, it comes as a surprise. So a lot of times I think there's this discomfort in approaching life as milestones and asking the what if scenarios. I am in a privileged position where I start from like the bottom up. I don't do cash flow modeling in coaching. We don't do that, but we talk about, or at least I talk with my clients about rhythm of finances. And I try to paint the picture for them, especially when I have a young couple looking to have children. I do the what if scenario in a way that I create familiarity. So in terms of like, let's imagine the future. What sort of timeline are you talking about? When would that happen? Obviously, you don't know what you don't know, but if it were to happen, how prepared would you be? And a lot of times, there's these moments where they realize they're blindsided by how you are conditioned to talk about finances. And it's mostly reactive stuff, like, we'll cross that bridge when you get to it. But when it comes to money, crossing that bridge when you get to it can really be uncomfortable.
Usually too late.
Too late, right? So creating that familiarity and trying to put yourself in those shoes where you've taken time off work for whatever reason, and then going back and trying to navigate childcare and other things. That's the happy stuff. Divorce, try to go from 2 incomes to 1 income when life is supposed to go on as usual, right? Especially when you create a lifestyle around children or, around yourselves as a couple, and the rhythm of your lifestyle having to be matched by the rhythm of your finances. Typically, you have the lifestyle drag and the lifestyle inflation where you want to carry on the way you've been accustomed to. And all of a sudden, those light bulb moments happen because they're like, we're so, focused on trying to get through every single day and going from like survival to growth to be thriving in a way that you see it as a seamless pathway. And sometimes you just don't realize how quickly you go from a place of well-being to a survival place in a matter of weeks sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's the other point you raised there. We talk about having children as a happy time, and it is, but it comes with some fraught times as well.
It's a huge but.
There is a big but there, isn't there? I think as a woman, you lose your identity.
You do.
I struggled with that for a while, going from like career woman and to mum sat in with a baby day in, day out, not really getting much back and that sort of thing. But the finance side as well, I took a year off. That's a year's worth of wages gone. It's a big impact when you're used to a certain way of life, isn't it? And actually, again, with the planning, do we sit down and go, okay, let's imagine you've had a kid. Let's imagine you've had 2 children. Okay, how are we going to manage that going forward?
And it's the compromise as well. Usually when you have children, you have to compromise somewhere.
Yeah.
And are you as a couple going to do it equally? Or more often than not, I don't see it as equally. I seem to find that one tends to compromise that little bit more than the other. And clearly that has a knock-on effect. One person is financially gaining more than the other.
Yeah. And it's funny how grandparents would pressurize you into now you got married or whatever, you're in a long-term relationship. When are you going to have a child? And I'm like, when are they going to ask how you're going to manage that child? Because essentially we're so wrapped into this emotional kind of, oh, it'll be great to have a child. But when I mentioned that the average childcare, like full-time care, is £1,600 a month, they just go, oh, no. And I said, well, imagine if you have that on top of your mortgage. How would that look like? How would you, if you stress test your budget, how are you going to navigate that? And then you go from holidaying when you want to holidaying during school breaks. How would that look like? Because it's much more expensive. So it's just like painting that picture. I don't think a lot of people do that, through that exercise of imagining a future with different circumstances, different priorities, different financial situation.
Absolutely. Like when I had children, I never even thought about how much childcare costs at the time, how much every day you'd have to pay, and it was a huge shock. I think now you're looking about £75-80 a day just for one child in childcare. But I think with it all, I think we all have to remember if a client is going through a divorce or a bereavement or even having a child, they're vulnerable. And as advisors, I feel we have to take the vulnerability approach with these clients very much. Are the decisions they're making a reactive decision, or are they thinking logically here? So we need to be aware of this. We need to give clients that breathing space to make the decisions, especially if you feel like they're making an erratic decision. Again, it falls back to cash flowing. If they go, like, I want to do this, okay, that's fine. Let's take a step back. Let's have a look to see what that means. This is what the goal you said you want. Is this still where you want to be? Right, then what's the knock-on effect here?
I think you brought up a good point there as well with the vulnerability side. I mean, when you get to know clients over a while, you'll see certain behavioural patterns, certain language that they typically use. I mean, there's an example of somebody I've been working with recently, and I've known him for a number of years now, and his emails usually are very detailed. He likes a lot, an agenda before a meeting. He likes all the detail, asks lots of questions, and we were making some big decisions in terms of IHT planning, and all of a sudden his emails were very short, very snappy, a little bit disinterested almost. You could see it was rushed, and I thought something's not right here. So I emailed him and said, let's have a meeting. So we did, and it turns out his partner had died a few weeks before from pancreatic cancer, and his sister hadn't long died either. So 2 deaths unexpected deaths in the family. And just picking up, because I knew him on that, we were able to say, well, let's slow down. What's the priority? Let's do that bit first. The rest will just wait a while until you've got a clear head. And that's important to him as well, because he is the sort of client who likes detail. He likes to think about it, we don't want him making any rash decisions. And I think it's important with clients, colleagues, friends, family, whoever it is, to just have those nuances of picking up on behavioural changes or language that's being used that makes you realise something's not quite right. Same with body language. I think I did this example in maybe one of our other podcasts with a new client, and I'd been to see her, and I had a trainee with me, and she wanted to talk about her pensions. And I could just pick up that something wasn't quite right. She wasn't telling me everything. And she burst into tears. And it turns out that she'd been divorced recently. She was very accustomed to a very nice lifestyle. And she'd been spending on lots of credit cards to try and maintain a lifestyle in the house that she was in a very nice area for her daughter. And she just wanted to get her daughter through private school and end there. So by picking up on those things, even if they are new clients, you can spot the vulnerability and then maybe change the approach that you were going to take and adjust the type of advice. We sorted her out in the end, and the compromise was she would need to downsize in the future, but she had peace of mind knowing that at least the house and that area could stay until the daughter was out of school, and then there'd be some changes. So I think it's something that we have to be quite aware of, don't we, with on the emotional intelligence side, being advisors.
Isn't this amazing? Absolutely. When you're saying things like this, 15, 20 years ago, financial planning this wasn't the discussion that we were having.
No.
You know, like we said earlier, it was about like targets,
Linear.
facts, performance, this and the other.
Yeah.
And now that we're goal setting,
Yeah.
what if scenarios is opening that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a big transformation in our industry, isn't it?
It's an evolution. I mean,
It is, absolutely.
You kind of navigate from the advisor taking ownership of the plan to collaborating with the client.
Absolutely.
And if you are in a collaborative state, you want to give them space to show up in a way that they can contribute to that decision making. When you go through change, decision making is affected. Like the quality of your actions, a reflection of the quality of your thinking, and the quality of your thinking is a reflection of the quality of your feeling. Well, when you go through change, you mentioned loss. This is exactly what a lot of people miss, understanding what is the level of loss. Because loss leads to grief. And we talked about the 5 stages of grief. Some people say it's 7 stages of grief. So, for example, in denial, the actual mentality is, this is not happening. Not happening to me, it's not happening at all. So you will find people just not paying attention to numbers, not getting engaged with decision making, just putting things off because they're not processing the change. Yeah. Then you see the bargaining, meaning the if only. Like you see it in the language, if only, maybe if I go and maybe if I do 2 jobs in terms of one, but I keep the house and I keep the kids and I like in clubs and I keep this and I keep that. They try to bargain, kind of holding on to the past, not ready to move forward. Now, if you know this is a process, and I think through mental health, there's more of an awareness around those stages and how people navigate them. More people are, some people are more equipped to navigate those quickly, whereas others aren't. And I think the secret is to understand, firstly, what are those stages and actually pick up on those signals just like you have. And then secondly, to be on that journey with your client or your spouse or your family member, to give them the space to process those in a way that suits them, but also helps with this decision making. And all the legwork, I feel it has to be done before. The stress testing, the what if scenario, the familiarity, not backing away from the tough conversations. And I think for the women in particular, because I think unlike men who can have a linear experience, whether you have a child or not, your body will stay the same. Your job will stay the same. You can keep your interests. You can have the same hobbies. You can stay committed to the life you've built up to the point. Whereas women have to compromise it. They're the main carers normally. Their bodies are not the same. Their minds are not the same because you have all this flush of hormones, this soup you have to make sense of.
Baby brain.
Yeah, you go back and you're in a vulnerable place. You're talking about the identity crisis. Like you only have 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. Yet all the life that you used to dedicate, all the portioning of time, we talk about resetting budgeting, not reset your time and energy so you can cater for being a mom and being a spouse and being a friend and being a carer, being a son or a daughter or so on. It can be exhausting. So for you to actually cope with that, you need to be equipped mentally, financially, physically with what you need to move.
You've just linked it in my mind. That's something you mentioned, Hazel. And I've found this a lot with clients where they've maybe inherited a share portfolio and they don't want to sell it or do anything with it because it's got that emotional connection to somebody. And there was something you said to me when we were discussing this, I don't know if you remember, about how you approach that. And I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I think because a lot of people do, if they inherit from someone, they have a huge emotional attachment to it. And whether it's a share portfolio or a tangible asset that's got value, but not value in a practical sense for that person. One of the approaches I take in that conversation is, first of all, it's really important for us as planners to acknowledge that we understand why that's important.
Yeah.
And then think to what the client's objectives are for their overall wealth and for their family. So looking down the generations. And one of the things I find is quite helpful to get those clients unstuck when it comes to perhaps disposing of an asset that's of no use to them, is to say, if you were to dispose of that, would it help you feel comfortable with that if we can ring fence the proceeds into something that's easily identifiable as a legacy from your mum or dad for your children, so that your children know that's where it came from.
Yeah.
And then you can see your children really benefiting from that.
Yeah.
And I think what you're doing is connecting what's really important for their future, which is their children,
Yeah.
with preserving that legacy for their parents. And that seems to work reasonably well with some clients.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good way of approaching it. You know, you're talking about one of those stages of grief is being able to move on in lots of different ways. But that was a really clever way of doing it, because I've had that over a number of years where there's just that emotional attachment and trying to, you don't want to convince a client, do you? But, you know, trying to help them see there may be a better solution without treading on those toes and making them feel that they're not heard and understood.
I think in all of the scenarios, like when, Alina, you were talking about when we're going to be the voice of reason for clients in difficult situations, the first thing to do is always to acknowledge why they feel the way they feel.
Yeah.
Because if you, and you know, I've had personal experience of this in different situations, but if someone's trying to tell you something that's incredibly important to them, and you say, well, okay, but, and then you move on, that really shuts down trust.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say, okay, I understand where you're coming from. Is there anything more you want to tell me about that? So I have full context. Let them speak if they wish. And then say, okay, well, have you considered thinking about it in this way? And it's just having that softer approach in that situation so that they know that they're being held. I think works well.
Yeah, it's important,
I think works to paint the picture in terms of the consequences, because there are some things that, you know, if you decide upon, you can reverse. But there are some irreversible decisions that you would make that could be life-changing, in terms of, like, you know, taking a pension out that were at the wrong time, or divesting at the wrong time, or you know, selling an asset or keeping an asset at the wrong time. And painting that picture in terms of how you can, you know, how reversible or irreversible, how impactful or less impactful. And again, helping them reprioritize in a way that they can actually connect the dots gently. Because I think these first three, the denial and anger and bargaining bit, these three phases are most likely to impact to derail a financial plan significantly. When someone is in that depression in the fourth stage, it's almost like numbness. And you can almost work with that for a while to kind of pause, because that's kind of harmless in a way. But at the same time, that's when they need it the most to kind of prepare for when they come out of the woods, to feel in control. And, you know, in terms of helping them, just to picking up on the language, because when somebody is in that depression stage, you'll find, like, what's the point? What is this for? You know, why bother? Why would you even, you know, try? Yeah. And I think that's important, to pick on the language and actually provide them the support that you're being held. And that's when it's so important for financial planning firms in particular, when you have to implement ideas and you have to carry on with the plan, to actually put the processes in place to allow them to delegate. Because when they're overwhelmed and unable to make decisions, the one thing that will give them a lifeline is someone say, I'm doing this for you. I've got this. All you have to do is this one thing. Can you do that? And actually enable them to, by doing the one thing that helps them reclaim their sense of trust in themselves and reclaim the honesty about the truth they have to see, like the new norm. That hugely is important, to go then to come out of that grief curve into acceptance and kind of ask themselves, so what's next now? And kind of go, okay, this is the plan. This is how we've adjusted for you. We press reset and we're good to go. Now, the reality is it's a backwards and forwards situation, because if they don't have the support, if they don't have the environment, if they don't have the tools, they're likely to revert back to, you know, starting all over again on that curve. And I think that's when the magic happens, when you have things planned, you know, having the what if questions before, and then having those systems in place for the client to feel held and supported, and maintain the decency and the integrity of what they stand for.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned support. So this is where my mind starts to go when we talk about AI a lot. You know, I believe there's another podcast coming about AI. Yeah. But I think the thing that makes us so great as advisors is we are people at the end of the day. And I think there's always a to and fro at the moment about online meetings and being, you know, commercial and saving time. But there's a few clients I've had recently who've lost their other halves, you know, and I go and see them personally. And quite often I'll give them a big hug when I see them, and actually, you know, that physical, emotional sort of connection.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a big difference. And I do wonder with the AI side of things, is that what's going to still set us apart and maybe why we still have a job at the end of the day?
Absolutely.
I think so.
know?
I think where AI is going to come is it will allow us to have more capacity to do those things.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Most of our time is taken up with the paperwork,
Yeah,
the
that's
admin
it.
bit.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll get taken off, and then we can go, right, then let's have a true meaningful conversation.
That's
Let's
it.
talk about
sit
this even
down.
more.
Yeah.
I think it's a new evolution. This is like the 4th stage of financial planning that we're getting from, going from the Prue man, you know, knocking on the door. Then we've gone to performance based, and now we've gone to cash flowing. And I think we are going into the new era now.
Yeah.
I always say we're turning into more like financial counsellors rather than planners, if you know.
The doers.
The doers.
Yeah.
And we are seeing more like a friend, someone that, you know, we would attend the funeral of the client, understand the situation that they're in.
Yeah. It's not just transactional.
Oh,
No.
absolutely not. No,
a
absolutely not. And then
relationship.
someone that they can just turn to
Yeah.
and feel like they can just open up as much as they want without feeling judged.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, when we talk about grief and loss and change, people think about emotions, like the emotional space or the emotional. But actually, when you want to help someone go through grief and, you know, process loss and everything, it's about creating capacity, the mind capacity to actually make decisions. And I think with financial advisors as well, I think through automation, you can reclaim some of that capacity and you to be more present, not having to do 1,000 things at the same time and be more in the situation with your client. I think that's a massive, massive help.
We definitely find that with using AI to take meeting notes.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can then truly listen to your clients. Although in some very sensitive situations, clients don't want that. And that's absolutely fine, obviously, but it can really help.
Yeah.
I do think, as you say, I think one of the things that will set us apart, I have no fear whatsoever that AI is going to take our jobs, because AI won't be able to pick up the nuance of when's the right time to ask a direct question and when's the right time to approach something gently. And I think coming back to earlier on in this conversation, we were talking about having those what if conversations and how do you ask some of those questions. And I think what we as humans have the capacity to observe and see the nuance in is, okay, can I just have this conversation with this client? Or do I have to do a bit of framing before I start this conversation? So, for example, if we were talking about modeling scenarios for if clients were going to separate, for example, if one of them had come into a lot of wealth, they were about to put in joint names, and you have to say, well, just so you know, if you do that, that's a gift. And if you separate, this person's got half of it. In that scenario, you want to be able to have that conversation because we need to. And you might start that conversation with, I want to ask some direct questions about situations that you probably wouldn't want to happen, such as if you split up. And it's an important conversation to have as your financial planner. Are you okay if I ask those questions? And I would call that communication contracting. So you're starting at the outset saying, can I do this? Most of the time, if you framed it well, they're not going to say no because they want to know what information you can impart. And it just gives you that freedom to have what would otherwise be sensitive conversations very directly and very clearly. And I think that's great for all of the what if type conversations. And in the divorce cases that you were talking about, where someone does really need to know that they can't live the life they used to live. Sometimes, again, you just have to be able to be direct, but just do it in a way that you've got permission to do it so that it's a safe space for that client and you don't launch in with, well, actually, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And AI will never be able to do that, I don't think.
And I just want to touch on, it's not like a life event, but it's something big that's happened, I think, to a lot of clients lately is, do you know, the changes in inheritance tax was a huge surprise, especially in my neck of the woods, farmers. And I've literally had clients distraught because all of a sudden they had everything in place, they knew what was going to happen, and I've had clients just reacting, going, that's it, I'm going to give that away now, or what's the point, I'm just going to so it's kind of going, okay, let's take a step back, I can see what you mean, it's not in place yet, it could change, but if it doesn't change, let's consider our options logically. But because I've had clients, or I've read of clients where they've just made erratic decisions, and it's just, as advisors, kind of giving reassurance, I know it's not great, but it's not horrendous either. And it was something that we couldn't foresee. We can only work with the tax system that we've got. And it's highlighting that to clients all the time. This is what we've got. This is what we're working with. And it's keeping that message going as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, I don't know about yourselves, but inheritance tax was a huge one. It has derailed. It's really upset a lot of my clients.
Yeah, I think there was a farmer that committed suicide because of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because he felt it was better to pass it on now before the rules changed.
Yeah.
Which is awful.
It's terrible.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Very, very sad.
And there could have been a simple solution to that or a way that they could have dealt with it.
Yeah.
But it was such a reaction mode, right? Then this is what I'm going to do without understanding. Actually, let's take a step back. Let's really work out your inheritance tax situation. Let's consider the options that you've got.
Yeah.
And let's work it from there.
Yeah.
I think that is so easily done, and especially like even after the autumn budget announcement, so many interpretations of the new laws, and a lot of people misheard it because they just skim through the headlines, and then they take whatever they think they take. And I think with AI, I think the quality of the output comes from the quality of the prompting, and you just need to have the language to know what to ask and how to process things. And I think there's huge gap there.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous if clients are inputting the data into AI. Say, for example, they go, right, then what is my inheritance tax situation now?
Exactly.
Or what AI is doing, it's kind of finding a solution somewhere and picking whatever material it can find. It might actually not be relevant. It might not be the correct law. And it can be quite... I've noticed it where it's quite compelling. It's kind of saying, no, it's ChatGPT or whatever. I said, this is correct, what I am saying.
We've had this conversation.
And we've had this conversation. I remember looking at inheritance tax calculation. I was like, that is wrong.
Right.
It's completely wrong. And I had the debate with AI and it was like, no, is right. And I started second guessing myself then. I was like, hold on, let's look at this material. Let's look at the regulation. And then went, oh yeah, you are correct. Now, I knew to test that because I am an advisor. But for clients who don't have that, they would have taken that as gospel and have gone, right, then I'm going to make a decision based off that. So I don't think AI will ever replace our jobs because it still needs that overhead. And what we need to do is control the input that gets put into the system.
And also with decisions like investments. Okay, well, so a lot of clients come in and say, oh, I've had a conversation with so-and-so, they're investing in this, that, and the other. Well, if you want to, you can ask AI what is a good combination of equity and bonds and so on. But the AI doesn't know what you have at home. It doesn't know the full extent of your debt. It doesn't have the full extent of how your family is built, the stages and ages and everything, the priorities and circumstances. And like looking in isolation could make sense in one area of your financial well-being. But you have so many dimensions to your life.
And AI is a people pleaser. If you've noticed it's definitely a people pleaser. So it's just kind of going, you've asked a question and it knows, well, you want an answer, but maybe there is no answer, but it's finding something because it's looking for. So we need, on AI side, need more education, but
a bit like Bob down the pub, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Invest in this.
Yeah.
We don't know anything
Good
about you.
Bob.
A drink more is like, I love you. You're the best.
Get invested in this.
But the amount of times, I'm sure you had it too, after decisions like putting more money into pension and so on, you have clients come in, it's like, I made an error. The other day, a lady just opened up. I was like, what is going on? And she was in tears already, even before she talked to me. I think I messed it up. And I was like, oh, okay. Hang on a second. Let's sit down and let's go through the numbers. And she was by the end of the call, she didn't do anything wrong. And she was like, I can breathe now. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad we spoke. And she was like, I'm so grateful. And she gets the service through work. And now she's double grateful for her manager, because her manager pushed her into having the conversation in the first place. She was like, I feel so stupid. I always feel so stupid. And I was like, there is no such thing as stupid question. Like, how would you know? You're not doing this on a daily basis. It's not your job to know it all. But the problem is you have like the odd advice at the pub, and then also you have this skewed view of the world if you have like a pension webinar, and a lot of the pension webinars, for example, leave you with a sense of, I missed the boat, I don't know what I'm doing, I should have done that ages ago, I'm no good, there is no hope. And I think it's more likely to see that with women who are in their like second or third phase of their lives, where they've raised kids and so on. Now they thought, oh, I've got my life back on track. I've got my finances back on track. And all of a sudden they feel the pinch of menopause, the brain fog, and they go, oh,
here we go again.
I don't think I can work for the amount of years I was planning to.
Yeah.
I'm a lost cause in like a lost cause in terms of retirement.
Isn't it great being a woman?
Yeah, I was
It's a
thinking
gift that
about
keeps
this
on giving,
actually.
isn't it?
Yeah, we were talking before, and if you think about like women are having children later now. So I was saying to Tracy, you know, like my daughter's 7, so we probably had about a year and a half of fairly decent sleep by now, and like bang, 42 this week, and I got the perimenopause symptoms starting, and I'm thinking, oh great, so probably for the next 10 years or so, maybe I'm not going to be able to sleep very well again.
Yeah.
But then you've got caregiving responsibilities that start to happen as well as you get older. My dad's 80, was he 86? You know, he's old, like having to help out with parents, and oh god, it's like, when does it stop? When's it end?
Well,
When does it get
hopefully,
easy?
the dream is that one day we're talking about caregiving responsibilities as everybody's responsibilities,
Yes.
not just falling on the women's shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and that's going to take a lot of time to like redress in society. And I think that starts, I mean, so much of what we're talking about starts that planning younger.
Yes.
But it's obviously quite difficult to get people into those conversations, which is why we can do some, like, it's great to do a podcast. But, you know, for caregiving, if men are used to looking after their children because there's equal maternity and paternity pay, which would be wonderful, all businesses should aim for, then the behaviors that you're learning, the good biases that you're creating are that everyone looks after everyone.
Yeah.
And
just the
it's
woman.
not when my as husband parents become ill, my wife is going to look after them, which I see happen quite a lot and surprises me, because I would consider that my husband's responsibility if it was his parents, mine if it was mine, hopefully my siblings as well.
Yeah.
But there is still this idea that it's just on the women's shoulders.
Yeah.
And I think even with things like careers and thinking about how women lose their earnings potential when they go off on maternity, and we spoke about childcare costs. One of the conversations I see happen quite a lot is the way childcare costs are framed as equivalent to one person's salary. So a woman might say, well, you know, there's no point me working because all of my salary is taken up in childcare costs. But actually that child belongs to 2 people. So it's only half your salary that's taken up on childcare costs, and it's half your husband's, you know, the half of that is applied to your husband or partner. It's important, I think, to even have those conversations with clients, because if you think about the long-term implications for women of deciding they're not going to work because of childcare costs and the knock-on effect that has on their earnings potential in the future, thinking about it in, again, a holistic family perspective, well, perhaps if they could view that as a joint burden, or a joint cost, I should say, and the woman maybe therefore goes back to work because she's like, well, I'm getting half my salary, because it's all about how it's framed, then actually it's an opportunity to earn more when you go back to work, be more financially resilient if you do need to stop earlier than you expected because of menopausal symptoms. So much of it is just early education. It's just so difficult to reach those people. And again, it's the responsibility of us when we do, going back to what we touched on in our last episode, is making sure women are involved in the conversation.
And have that understanding of the ripple effects, because I think it's easier to think in terms of short bursts. It's like, oh, I'll wait until, but you have the compounding of the money that you would otherwise, you know, little and often it usually wins the race of like high intensity contributions into a pension or an ISA or whatever, right? And so just understanding the effect of just letting go and not being disciplined enough and not putting money. And you're right. I think if people thought of themselves as assets, if you were to build a business, what would you do with your assets? You wouldn't say, oh, look, never mind this one. This one is becoming a liability. Never mind about that. I'll focus on, no, it's not sustainable, because you have asset erosion. Like, you know, when a person who's overworked goes through burnout and stress and, you know, mental health, you know, frailing mental health, how would that benefit the other? You know, you have broken relationships and you have, you know, everything kind of falls apart if you don't look after your assets, or if you don't sustain the potential of those assets. And I think a lot of people would benefit from understanding what's the best outcome with what the resources we have, and then understanding how can we enable each other to be at the best level of our contribution.
Yeah, definitely.
And think about the way that actually, the positive impact that would have on men. I know obviously we're here today talking about women, but if you have a couple where the woman does continue to work and that you pay for childcare, actually it means that you're both contributing to, first of all, being good role models for the children, but you'll both be balancing the school pickups or whatever it is. And it might give the man the opportunity to work 1 day less a week and the woman 1 day less a week. And there's a lot of things that, in the world as it has been historically, men have missed out on, missed out on being available parents. And just that benefit, I think, can get overlooked in the conversation. And I know we spoke briefly about the manosphere earlier, but this idea that, it's us against them, actually balance is wonderful for everybody, because balance is what gives people choices.
Yeah, and I think it's also important, especially for the man, to feel that they can talk to their employer and go, look, we've just had a new child. I need to take a break. And for them not to feel it's not a man thing to do. And feel like they've got that safe space to go, I need to take that break. Or, my wife's just had a baby, I need to take an extra few more weeks off. Not see it as a weakness.
Ben had that in
male managers need to lead by example.
Absolutely.
I spoke to a friend whose husband was MD in his business, and they were about to have children, and he was saying that he was probably not going to take much time off. And I remember the conversation with him. I said, you absolutely have to, because no other man in your business is going to do this if you don't do it. And it's an example you need to set. And he was quite responsive to that and said, actually, that's a really good point. And also gives him permission to do it and feeling like he's doing a good thing for his business, not just taking time off and being a slacker, or however he had it framed in his head.
And it's very much like, they say happy mum, happy baby. It's the same thing. Happy dad, happy baby, happy family.
That's it. It's all about the balance, like you were saying. I was just thinking, if there were certain questions that we think we should be asking as advisors to help this balance occur and for women to feel more prepared, for these life events, what sort of things do you think specifically we should be asking?
This is not a question, but I think it's important that the woman knows where they stand financially, right? And where do you stand at the moment? And then how do we build from that? And do you understand what you've got? Do you understand the overall picture? I think that's one of the most important things. And just being involved in the finances, it touches on in the first podcast. It's having that confidence to have those conversations. And just giving yourself time to make the decisions as well. Don't feel like you have to make a decision there and then. I know we touched on about missing the boat, doing it too late, but you can do it too soon as well. And not reacting. Think logically. Think about, right, then what is the goal that we're trying to achieve? What could get in the way? And the what if scenarios, and going, right, then let's go ahead with this. And it's going to change. It's going to derail, but that's what we're here for, to put you back on track.
Anything you'd add, Hazel?
I think thinking about questions that I would ask for women going through vulnerable situations, coming back to what we were speaking about pregnancy, having had a baby, they do often get overlooked as vulnerabilities, and we don't, but because they're happy occasions. But actually, it's not just the emotional vulnerability, it's the tiredness. And so I think just, again, having open and frank conversations is my go-to solution. But saying, how is your change of circumstances impacting you emotionally and your energy levels? How is your concentration? And do you want us to, keep this meeting at an hour today? And if we need to, break it into chunks. Or since your circumstances have changed, have you got any new concerns? And what other things are you thinking about at the moment that we may not have discussed before? Just kind of setting the scene that nothing's off the table for discussion. And the assumption in those questions is there will be things you're worried about, and it's a safe space to share them. So I think that's quite important.
I think I would add to that one, just what are your main concerns at the moment, your main worries, just to get that out in the open straight away. Because I find that if clients have got something on their mind, if you don't deal with that first a lot of the time, then they can't concentrate on maybe everything else we need to address. Anything you'd finally add?
I would think, based on what I see on a daily basis, I think we don't talk about enough what's important to each individual in terms of where they place value. Because just like we were talking about, maybe men would like to be more involved. A lot of men just hesitate when it comes to saying how they see family, you know, what sort of environment they want to create for their children, how they want to bring up their children, how much space they want to take into the bringing up their children, and so on, as well as when it comes to caring for parents and caring for each other and looking after self as an important element in that mix. Because you're talking about identity. And I think that's a very valuable thing to look at, because I think for a lot of men, they default to the identity of the provider in the absence of opportunities to become a real, like having that identity as a carer, you know, not just a dad, a biological dad, but being in that carer situation where you have your daddy day. You have your mummy day, you have your nursery days, and everyone becomes really important. And I think for mental health, I think, again, selfishly, I want to stop men connecting their identity to a payslip.
Yeah.
You know, because that is really damaging. When you look at the retirement planning, where a lot of people get confused, like, now you should be in absolute bliss, you know, you are retiring. Why are you so sad? And a lot of people die shortly after they retire, don't they? It's because your sense of purpose is gone. If you don't have your identity tied to caring, to creating something outside of your provider status, when that goes, what are you left with?
I tend to find that when a man retires, they struggle more than the woman, and they just don't know what they're doing. Like I say, it's that sense of purpose. All they've done is work. The woman, on the other hand, maybe been a bit more in and out and has maybe thought about, right, then when this happens again, this is what I'm going to do. They've thought about it because they've been through that process already.
That's it. But you know, it tends to happen naturally, because women, because of menopause, they tend to decrease the days, and then they get booked up quite quickly because your family needs you as a childminder. So they transition from being an employee to being an employee and a grandmother and like a carer. And then for them, the purpose shifts, like the sense of purpose multiplies, because obviously they have all these other functions and roles. Whereas grandparents, they work 5 days a week, a lot of them, and then they go from go-go to no-go. And then that is a massive gap to fill. And you can golf so many days until you get absolutely bored out of your head.
So the woman is redefining themselves all the time. It's like, right, then what am I about now? What am I about now? Not so much the man. With the man.
They definitely have the resilience, but it's not often matched by the finances. And so that's the problem. I think a lot of them, they do have this multitude, these all like never-ending dimensions, but sometimes it's out of necessity. And when you have your time and energy are limited and your timeline is limited, that plays a lot into like weighing down, you know, all the decision making and action taking, and it takes its toll on the physical health, mental health. I think it's not, you know, there's definitely a huge amount of resilience, but often it's not backed financially. So that's when you see them struggle.
And then you have the opposite for the men in those scenarios. And wouldn't it be great if we just got to a place where everyone had the opportunity throughout their lives to reinvent themselves a little bit and create themselves as a more complete person, and both have more financial stability?
Absolutely.
I think you're right. I think that's a good place to stop there. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we've got time for. A huge thanks to Alina, Hazel and Tracy for joining me on the Wealth and Women podcast, and to you for listening. To find out more, you can find useful links in the show notes. You can also explore related articles and more podcast episodes on the Personal Finance Professional website, many of which can be recorded as CPD and logged directly on the site with a click. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.